For more updates, click on subscribe and click on bell button for latest notifications. So here we have a lot of servers, like which may be a physical servers or which may be a virtual servers. So each and every server is installed with um, some of the applications, services, and they maybe have servers monitoring like hardware, RAM, and CPU, and its motherboard, all of this stuff, right? So example, if you want to monitor all of the systems, so we have to get one kind of environment for the monitoring, is that you can use manual monitoring, which like maybe you can develop your own scripts, which may be a shell scripts, PowerShell scripts, or batch files, or maybe any other Python or anything. So you will get monitored. But here, whenever you're doing a manual scripting, so the manual scripting will have a different aspects, like which may have some failures or which may not able to execute by the scheduler sometimes on the time, and sometimes you may get errors on the scripts or like that. So that time you may not able to get the proper data or the proper alerts from the manual scripts. So that is one advantage and disadvantage. So advantage is that you no need to buy any software, or you no need to install or manage any software. You just make a piece of script and you just schedule it and you'll get the alerts. Okay, but here you may not have any historical data. Just like you may not have an historical data like performance data. Example, you are monitoring one of the disk utilization. Example, so disk utilization you are monitoring as using the manual script, but this does not store any report if you do on a manual scripting sometimes. So most of these scripts may not have some intelligence to store on the database side, so you just run, and whenever there is a data usage, it's more like 90% or the one points are filling up, you will get the alert, and based on that you react and resolve the issue. But here, if you monitor using the any monitoring system, example, any monitoring system, maybe in this case Nagios. So if you monitor using the Nagios, what you will get the advantage is that, so in manual scripting is that you will get alerts whenever it matches your criteria. So it does not have any intelligence that when to send the alert or when to stop the alert. So it just keep on sending whenever our threshold is matched. But in Nagios, what we can do is that we can modify or we can monitor the alerts based on their iterations. Like example, here we will have the Nagios is that, example, whenever I'm checking the CPU utilization example. So this CPU utilization, whenever I'm monitoring one of the server, so I say that to the Nagios, I instruct the Nagios saying that whenever you check 5 times, if it is still 90%, send me an alert. So this way, one thing is that which will automatically verify 5 times again your CPU utilization is um, CPU utilization is 90%, you are getting the alert. So that is the one of the advantage. Again, this data will be stored on the database, which is called RRD database in case of Nagios core RRD file. If it is an Nagios XI, which may store into the MySQL and PostgreSQL. So these are the database. So whenever you look, for example, these will store for 365 days. Example, if I wanted to verify one of the server and go that, okay, see what is the exact utilization of my server from the last 1 month or last 6 months, then you can verify that whether your hardware or the whatever the software you install on system which is working as expected. So based on this historical data, what you can do is that you can plan your capacity, like server capacity. Example, every time the server is running, memory is 95%, which means that you need some more memory to that server. Or if your server is running always 90% of your CPU utilization, which means that which may need to be increased your CPU utilization more, like you have to add some more CPUs to the hardware, or you have to migrate your server services from that server to another server. So that way what happens, the monitoring will help you in for the management part perspective. Like example, your management is asking that, okay, what is this server utilization, did we utilizing the proper hardware, like the hardware is underutilized or overutilized or utilized properly as per the requirement or not. So that way you can get historical data, and as well as the it will store or it will send the appropriate alert to the configured users. Now, as of now, the Nagios will do like this. So, which means that you will get the utilization and appropriate alerting, and you will get an historical data. So, based on that historical data, you can do some planning. Okay. So, if you come to the Nagios, right? Let me open that. So, So what is mean by the real-time monitoring? So if you say real-time monitoring, the normal monitoring is nothing but you have to monitor the appropriate services. So here this we'll segregate as a two platforms. One is called as a host related monitoring. So, and one more is service related monitoring. So what means that? So host related monitoring here is that. So the host related monitoring is memory utilization and CPU utilization and swap utilization, hard disk utilization, like disk utilization, just like slash root slash var slash user slash home, something like that, mount points utilization, or if in case C drive, D drive, something like that in a Windows case, like this. So these are the and again yeah, these are the most comes under host utilization. So if you're taking a service level monitoring, so what is that service level monitoring? Which means that example, you have installed a web server, so that HTTPD services, you want to monitor web service monitoring. Okay, and if you want to monitoring something like MS SQL service monitoring, or if you want to say MS SQL database monitoring, like this. So which are database, or if you want to monitor like web URL status or SSL certificate status, so this comes under these services. So whatever the service status, example, you have installed some Oracle database on it or Oracle service on it, or you have installed some other services like maybe Tomcat or any other services, then you can monitor the service status and their utilization, all this stuff. There are a lot many options in the Nagios you can monitor most of the times, like which you have around I can just go ahead and you can show you the Nagios Exchange, so you will understand how. So if you go to this Nagios Exchange, where most of the free plugins are available. So here, from here, you can download the plugin and test it as per your environment, and you can monitor your environments. You can see that. So there are so many plugins. Example, if you go to here, 4,500 services and plugins. So in this, you can monitor most of the times, almost everything, like log files monitoring, Java application monitoring, so email monitoring, database monitoring, cloud monitoring, backup and backup status as well. Also, sometimes you can monitor web servers, video conferencing softwares, or something like most of the things you can monitor from here. This using these plugins, you can monitor. Um, so that is called as a real-time monitoring, which means that whatever you need, example in server, example you have some production server, in that you have installed some Oracle web application, and you wanted to monitor that web application URL whether it's always up and running. Then whenever there is a URL down, then you should get an alert. So that way you can react is that this based on this alert. Most of the times, most of the administrators in the real-time industry, they depend on this monitoring tools, because the monitoring tools will alert us, because we cannot monitor, the humanly impossible to monitor the 100 to 1000 servers every time. Each and every time you wanted to just cross verify the server. Example, if you take what is the difference between monitoring monitoring between the manual and the Nagios monitoring. So that is what we have just now see that. So manual scripting, you can develop your own scripts, which may be a shell script, PowerShell scripts, or Python scripts, whatever it is. But you may not get, one difference is that you may not get historical data, and you may not get the appropriate alerting. So it will send an alert, but so it's keep on sending the alerts whenever the thresholds are matching, so it does not have any intelligence in it. But of course you can make some scripts intelligence, but not like the system will not be that intelligence. If it is intelligent, means you have to write a long program, if you need to have some programming skills. So otherwise, if you are using any monitoring tool, so you just download the plugin and use it. Okay, so in comes to the lab setup. So I just wanted to don't wanted to waste your time in a theoretical stuff. I just wanted to show you some practicals in it, and so you just practice from today. I'm just going ahead and give you some idea on how we can set up this um, lab setup. So I'm using VMware Workstation. So if you are familiar with VirtualBox, you can do it. Otherwise, uh, if you want to use VMware Workstations too, you can use that. Okay, so here I'm just going to create some environment for us, so that later point of time we use the same VMs, and we will use this, all of this session will use the same VMs. So now just I create the new folder. It's called Nagios monitoring. So for now, so I'm just making some VM environment here. So I just create a new virtual machine here, and for this requirement, we need to have the server requirement here, which is called RAM. So example, so here before setting up an environment, so I just give you a little bit idea. So of course I will cover this in next class as well, but just an idea for you. So how to make your capacity for the Nagios server. So that is called, one is two ways we can monitor the servers. One is called agent based monitoring. So in case of it is a Linux, you can use NRP. In case of it is a Windows server, you can use NS client. Plus is the software you can install on the server side and monitor it. So this is called as an agent based monitoring, which means that we'll install the agent on the server, and we'll get the data from the client to the server. Then the server will modify that, and it will make the data as appropriately and store into the database. So that is called as an agent based monitoring. And agentless monitoring, so when we use in a agentless monitoring and when we use agent based monitoring. Example, if you are commissioning a new server, which means that entirely new server, then before you are moving into the production itself, you just install the Nagios agent and move it to the production. So but sometimes what we get is that we already have some hundreds of servers in production, so we wanted to install the agent on that production server. So most of the management says that if you install the packages on the production environment, you don't know that whether the package is going to make any changes to the production environment, which may bound to fail the environment. So that's why. So I don't want to take any risk on the production system. So I just wanted to use agentless monitoring. So this agentless monitoring does not require much packages, or it does not have many dependencies. So it just you need to install the SNMP package, whether it is a Windows server, whether it is a network device, or whether it is a Windows server. So most of the devices supports SNMP. So you just need to enable the SNMP, and in SNMP you need to enable community string. Then the password, the community string is called as just like a password. But if you have a SNMP version 3, then it also have the password other than the community string. It need to authenticate to the that SNMP. So here SNMP we have the versions 1, 2, 3. So 1 is very unsecure, but we most of the times we use SNMP version 2 on most of the devices. But if you want to use SNMP 3, yes, you can use it. So you need to configure the appropriate authentication on the device. Then the same authentication will be provided on the Nagios server to authenticate that and get the details from the agent. So when we use agent and when we use agentless. So agent is when we commission the server before we move into the production, then we install the agent and configure into the monitoring. So sometimes we wanted to get monitored from the agentless because we already moved the server to production, so we don't want to disturb any packages, or we don't want to install and modify some alter the production, so that we may not get some approval from the management side that you don't need to install any packages on that. So that's time we will use agentless monitoring. Okay, so what is the advantages we'll get using the agent based and agentless? So agent based is that you can configure most of the advanced level monitoring. Like example, if you wanted to configure anything like customized scripts, also you can include in this agent based monitoring and pull up some statuses from there. But in agentless, you need to develop the SNMP OIDs, the MIB data, then you have to push that. So that is going to be a lot of difficult job, and some of the SNMP may not support that processes. So that is the difference variation in using the agent based and agentless. So if you understand, if you use agent based monitoring, then your utilization of RAM and CPU will be very less, because the SNMP will keep on poking the server for the network traffic, and it will use a lot of memory and CPU. But agent based, what will it will do is that it will use only little bit of the its memory and CPU, and it collects the data and periodically it send the data to the Nagios server. So you have to capacity your server. So example, if you want to monitor agentless servers, example like 70 to 100 servers, then you may need to have more RAM and more CPU cycles for that. So if it is an agent based, then you need to have, example, a 4 GB RAM for 100 servers and 2 CPUs. In the sense, 2 CPU cores would be more than enough. But if you have agentless servers for 100, then you need to have 8 GB of RAM and 4 cores. So like that, so you have to prepare your environment, with prepare your server. So 100 agent based servers, you have to have 4 GB RAM, and 100 agent based servers, you have to have 8 GB RAM, and agent based 2 cores and agentless 4 cores. And disk space for both of the servers, it is same, because it collects the data and store into the database, whether it is an RRD database or MySQL database or PostgreSQL. So, or if you have any other database, you can also use it, but these are the negative support will be supported by the Nagios. So most probably we use RRD, MSSQL or PostgreSQL. So here the disk space, if you have 100 GB for storing your 100 servers data for 6 months. So again, it depends on the services what you configure for the performance data as well. Because if you use like 2000 to 5000 servers, sorry, 5000 services, then the performance data will store on the database. So the data disk growth rate and database growth rate will be more. Okay, so this is what we required from the server side: RAM capacity and CPU capacity and disk capacity. So other than that, network, as usually we have to have the network speed. Maybe if it is 1 Gbps, in case of your NIC card would be more than enough, but most of the modern servers will come as 2 Gbps or even 10 Gbps connectivity. So I hope it would be not a bottleneck for selecting any of the NIC card. So 100 Mbps also works, but if you have more servers, better to have 1 Gbps or more than that. So that would be added advantage of keeping your monitoring faster. So you may not get any latency in terms of. And if you take any kind of hardware related, so no hardware specific, even you can install these Nagios on the virtual machine. So okay, so this is what we have to capacity our server before we do it. So based on this, I do not have 100 servers. Maybe I can use 6 GB or 8 GB. So I have memory on this server, and 2 cores, that would be more than enough, and 100 GB would be fine. So here, operating system which will support, if you have subscription, then you can use RHEL, or if you do not have any subscription, you can use CentOS, or if you're familiar with Ubuntu, you can also use Ubuntu. So here I suggest to have more than RHEL 6.x or 7.x or 8.x version. So in similar way, CentOS also is 6.x, but do not use 6.x because the latest PHP version may not support on the 6.x version. But if you want to use a older version little bit, then you can use 6.x. Or most of the people will be most of the familiar with the 6.x, that's why I'm telling 6.x, but you can use 7.x and 8.x, that will be a latest version. So here you can use 18.04 or 19.04 would be a good version on the Ubuntu. Maybe you can also use 20, but that is very latest version. Not sure is there any glitches going to be happen, or is there any bugs. So these are the most stable versions you can use on the environments. If you are going with a production environment, I always suggest to go with RHEL 7.x or CentOS 7.x or Ubuntu 19.04. So that would be more appropriate version for the production environment. So do not use latest version on the CentOS, because still we do not have any stabilized environments on the 8.x version. So that I do not suggest to use on a production environment as 8.x. So this is the operating system you need. That's it. So if you guys have Red Hat login, you can download Red Hat version, and if you don't, you have subscription. But most of our are personal, so I eliminate RHEL for now, and you can use CentOS 7.x or Ubuntu versions on your environment. So I use 8.x in this environment to show you guys. and I'm just creating the VM. So based on that capacity, we're just going to create the virtual machine. So here um, I'm just going to select CentOS 7. So here template, if you select any template, this only the template which will give you appropriate hardware details. It does not have, if you can select any of this template, does not matter, but you can select appropriate version and go next. Here, so you just monitor, change your virtual machine name. So I say Nagios server. So we may have different versions, right? So I say Nagios core server. So later point of time we may install Nagios XI. So that time will give you Nagios XI server. So here, and I'm just going to create two processes, and maybe I can give 4 or 6 GB, something like that. So I have sufficient memory. And use NAT. So I suggest to use NAT. Do not use bridge. That would be more appropriate for the lab environment. So use NAT. And anything, any disk you can select. Here, anything you can select what is your appropriate configuration and create the new virtual disk. And here, so we may need 60 to 80 GB would be fine, but for now I'm just giving 100 GB and store in single hard drive. So later point of time, if I move, that would be easy for me. And here you just remove this sound card and printer, so that is not required for our environment, and finish. So I'm just moving this VM here. So this is our environment. So Nagios server VM has been created. So now, so I just give you a one machine installation. Later point of time, you can simply clone that machine and use for clients. So, and edit the virtual machine settings here. Go to the CD and attach your ISO file here. So you have to download the ISO file, but I already have the ISO file. So if someone do not have the idea how to download, so I just simply show you. You can simply go to the Google and type CentOS download. Okay, you can go to this centos.org download location, and here, so there are two, right? So you just go to CentOS Linux DVD ISO here, and these are the ISO files. So you can download any of this. So you can download this latest version, maybe this latest version. You can simply click on here. It is downloading. You can see that, which is going to be 7 GB. So which I already downloaded. So I'm not downloading it. That simple. You can simply go to Google and look for CentOS download and click on that Linux ISO and download that ISO file. So later you just need to attach here. You just go to CD DVD here and use ISO file image file and go to your location, appropriate location, and attach your. So here is my CentOS 8. You can just attach it and click OK. Later you just power on the machine. So it will come to the installation media here. So here what we are going to do, so first of all, before going to installation, so I recommend few settings here. So you have to make one thing is that /usr is a separate partition and which should going to be in a LVM. So why we need /usr and /opt is in a separate partitions and we need LVM? Because default location for the Nagios to be installed on /usr location, and /opt is going to be used as a backup, something like we do.
Yeah, basically, what's the difference between NAT and Bridge one?
NAT and bridge one. Okay, so NAT will do only for your host communication. Example frame that you have a your machine, right, laptop, and from laptop to your VM and VM to your laptop, there is a bridge communication is enabled in the backend. So I just going to show you is that maybe it will be a little bit more appropriate. So maybe other guys also have the similar question. If you go to your network settings and you go to this Ethernet and say change Ethernet adapter settings, and you see this, right? So here, so these are the adapters will be created in the back end, and this adapter will have the IP addresses. So what the NAT will do is that if you have your VM environment with settings, example here, network settings, if you go, so in this, if you go to this NAT and say change settings, I will just explain you a little bit detailed. So here, if we go to this NAT settings, you can see that, right? So what is there actually? The IP series here it is in my environment. It says 48 series. But if you go to my base environment, like the base host, if I go to my base host and type my IP details, so I can see that my IP details is 1 series. So whenever you use a bridge, what happens is that you using this bridging configuration, you will get the 1.series IP address, which means that from whatever your base machine has this network, so your virtual machine is going through the traffic which going through this gateway, which means that your base machine gateway. Okay, so but if you use a NAT, what happens? So it will convert your network, so this network traffic, to your base machine only. So it will not go behind your host, which means that your Linux machine or whatever your virtual machine can only be communicate within this host only. So it will not go behind that. But if you use a bridge, so the virtual machine can be accessed anywhere from your environment, which means that you may connect lot of devices in your environment, like you may connect your Wi-Fi device with your mobile or other laptop, maybe other TV unit or something like that. From there also your virtual machine can reach if you use the bridge setting. But if you use a NAT setting, the machine can only be reached within this host only, which will not reach from the other device which is connected to your Wi-Fi or which is connected to your network. Okay, I hope you got your these settings details.
Yeah, yes, yes. No, it's clear. Thank you.
Okay, so that is what the NAT and bridges. So yeah, so we have to select the bridge. So here, so we need to use separate LVM partitions for USR and OPT. Why? Because later point of time, if you wanted to do a backup, or if you wanted to do example, my USR data was completely filled up, then later point of time, if you wanted to increase, then if you make only one root partition, so you cannot uh, flexibly increase your LVM partition size. So but if you make a separate LVM for ESR and separate LVM for OPT, then you can simply increase your LVM partition size. So that makes more possibilities in a later point of time. May your not just data is growing and growing, or you may adding most of the servers, upcoming servers into the Nagios monitoring. So this is what you have to remember and create the separate partitions for /usr and /opt. That is one point before installing the operating system. You have to make it clear. So and say install the operating system here. So here we have to select what are the language here. So most of the guys uses English, I hope. So select the English language, and here, so keyboard, so whatever the keyboard you use, yeah, you have to select the installation source as local media, of course that is ISO we are using. And so here for the server selection, we don't need GUI for our Nagios server. So that is should be very careful. So one suggestion I give you for all of you guys in real-time environments, don't use any extra packages. Okay, so if you use any extra packages what you required, then if you use more than that, then it may going to be a more vulnerable, which means that you may have more security related issues. So that's why you always, if it is possible, use minimal installation only. So that would be more appropriate for the production systems to use. So but sometimes you may have to have server GUI capability. So because most of the developers, they wanted to work using the VNC sessions or something like that. So in that particular cases, you use server G with GUI. But in production environment, most of the cases you use minimal as a best way to do it. So here you just select some legacy compatibility, because most of the guys still are compatible with the RHEL6 or RHEL5 or CentOS 5 and CentOS 6 commands. So that's why you select this legacy Unix compatibility settings and select this development tools. That's it. Other than that, you don't need to do any special installations over here. So we'll install the required packages later point of time. So you just select, remember, minimal installation, and you need to select this legacy compatibility and development tools compatible, development tools packages. That's it, done. Then so our time zone, based on the time zone we have to very set it up. So our is Indian time zone, Asia Kolkata. And so here we have to manually do a partitioning. You just select the customize and click done. So here maybe you can just click on here, it will automatically create the LVMs for you, but we don't need that. So we have to create our own. So mount point. So for now, we just going to create our required partitions first /usr. So here, out of this, I'm just going to use 20 GB as for /usr, which means that my software is going to reside in /usr. Add mount point. So and here you just select the type as LVM. So do not forget. So but if you want to use some reduce or some other extra settings, you can use ext4 or xfs, anything is fine. So based on your capacity you can use anything, ext4 or xfs. So I'm using xfs. So here, and I'm just going to use another called /opt partition, and this also I'm just going to give 20 GB. So this is also going to be an LVM partition, and for now I just use home partition is as 10 GB because I do not have any much data to store at home. So I just want to download some plugins for here, and remaining I'm just going to use swap as something like 8 GB. So always remember swap would be like 2x by RAM. So but for now 8 GB would be sufficient. Later point of time, if you have more servers, if you want to add, you can always and swap memory by adding another extra partition and swap on that, so that your swap partition can be increased. So for now I'm using /boot, so which will be going to be 2 GB in size. That is the standard partition. So that's it. Yes, so this is what we need, and accept the changes. So remember, keyboard settings, sorry, and installation is minimal, and language whatever you would like to, time zone whatever you would like to, and software is selection is going to be a minimal settings with the compatibility by Unix libraries and some of the development tools. And network settings, if you want to configure your IP address right there, you can just switch on here, and if you have DHCP you will get this IP address right away. So here if you want to set up manual, so always would be a better option for the manual settings. So 192.168.135 will use for our Nagios server, and 255.255.255.0 is our netmask, and my gateway address is 48.2. So and DNS server is also 192.168.48.2. and search for domains. I do not have any domains, and disable this IPv6 for a later point of time, no network issues. Okay, save it. And if you want to name it your Nagios server, you can straightforwardly name it here, Nagios server, you can say maybe Nagios core as local domain. So I do not have any domain here, domain name, so click done. So that is what the settings. So here kdump settings. So what is this kdump is that? So it is out of topic, but some of our member is asking that what is kdump. So kdump is a kernel dump. So whenever your system is going off, example say that all of this sudden your hardware crash, so you do not have any clue that what is the behind it went wrong. So you need to have some debugging logs to dig into your system that what went wrong, whether hardware failed or software failed, or some of the somebody's hacked your system and data is encrypted or whatever has happened. But before going down, which means that your system is going down, so what it will do is that it will dump all the crash related data into the network path, which means that you have your so I just draw the diagram here so that will be easy for us to understand. So example, you have your server here. This is your Nagios server. Okay, so what happens here is that this server will be mounted. Example, here you have one NFS server example. Okay, so here from your NFS, what you do is that you just mount export. So one of the NFS mount point you mounted here, and you configure that as a kdump for your dumping your kdump here. So what happens here is that, so whenever and you have to use this SSH keyless passwordless authentication from this host to here, so that the data will be dumped into this host. Otherwise you can also use other host to directly kick in and dump your details. So kdump, when you configure this kdump service or the kdump, so what happens is that whenever your server is going to crash, so it will not immediately crash unless your power is gone. So it will crashing and one by one service is going down. So before that, the kdump, the kernel dump, will collect the entire details from your system, and it will drop that dump data into your this network path. So what happens, this host went down, so we do not have any access to the host, but we want to investigate what happens to that host. This kdump will give the data to analyze what went wrong in the host to identify the details. So that is what the kdump is. In a security, so you don't need to keep any security policies. If you'd like to use maybe some of the target servers, example, you are really using some security servers like which is demilitarized the zones host, or the host are really exposing to the outside, then the security policies should be configured. So that is the recommended settings for the installation. So otherwise you can just switch off this security settings or the firewall settings for our environment. So now you have to set this root password, so whatever it is. So I suggest to use strong password, but I'm using very weak. So here you don't need to create any user, but if you want, so of course, which you may need for your I'm just creating my account, so I prefer this way. Make it as administrator for later point of time. That's okay. Yeah, so this is what you have to select. So you can see that, right? So I'm installing very minimal packages, 618 packages only for this server. So that's what we need for this, and later point of time we will use and install the packages which required for our environment, which may be like PHP, Perl, Python, and web server and some of the C libraries. So this is what we need for our Nagios to be installed. Again, we need to install some duplicate package as well and rsync package as well for this. So these are the packages we are going to install later point of time after installing the server. Okay, so our operating system got installed, so we just have to reboot. So you just click on reboot. Once again, please. Okay, so you just go to edit, and you can see that virtual network editor. So you can click on this editor, and it will open one pop-up window, and here you can see this NAT, and here you can just go to NAT settings and see that gateway IP. So which is the IP you have to use in your virtual machine as a gateway IP address. Okay, and go to this virtual machine settings, and you can see that the network adapter settings is going to be in NAT, so that you will get a proper communication from your host. So you just have to install the putty software. Maybe if somebody's don't know, I don't think all of these guys know, but I just quickly go through. So you just type putty download, and you can just go to the putty.org site, and here you can see that you can download the putty from here. You just click on this here setting, so here link, and I suggest to use the installer, because this will install some utilities, putty gen, some other utilities, so that would be more useful. So you just download, I think all of the systems would be 64-bit. So if you have 32-bit, you just download 32-bit. If you are 64-bit, you just download 64-bit. So this is the software, you have to just download it, and then after that you just run next, so that your putty will be installed. So that's what the settings. After that, you just go to menu and type putty. So you just open that putty settings. So this is, so here you may not see all of these saved sessions, because these are the my saved sessions, that I just get this all the settings. So you will get only this default settings here and this putty configuration window. So here what you have to do is that before, okay, so I'm just going to show you that how this will connect. I just log into this, and you ensure that systemctl status SSHD. So this service should be running on your machine, your Linux machine. So otherwise you may not get the SSH configuration or SSH connectivity from outside of that host. So you just see that which is active and running. So remember, systemctl status SSHD is the service you have to verify. So then you already have the IP address. You have to type that IP address here, 192.168.48.135. Okay, and if you want to save this session for later point of time, you can just give the session name here, say Nagios code server, and say save. So you can see that you are saved your session. You just double click on it. Later again, when you want to connect, you need to type IP address. It will automatically load this details, this IP address and details, so it will connect to your host. Example, I'm just closing that window. Again, I'm just opening the window here, and you can see that click here and load, which means that your IP settings will be automatically loaded. You don't need to do anything. So again, you just click open and say first prompt, it will ask you for the security, say yes, and here you have to type your username, and which will take some time here, because which is looking for the DNS to resolve your host name. So that's why it will take a little time to prompt your username and password. So in order to avoid this delay, so what you have to do is that, so in order to avoid this delay, what you have to do is that, maybe I will increase the font size a little bit. So here you just go to appearance and change your font size, so it would be bigger. So most of the guys, all of the guys able to see that, right? So here if you avoid that prompt latency, so what you can do is that you can go in your machine, the base machine, and type drivers if you are using Windows. Okay, so if you're not using Windows, it may be a different, and go to /etc, and you can see that /etc host file, right? So you just edit this file, and here you just have to add that entry here. Example 192.168.138.135 your core server, or what is your host name. Maybe you can just simply copy from here and paste it here and save this. It will ask you to enter into administrator and save this. So this way what happens is that whenever you connect again, so we'll try to connect again. So put settings, type username, immediately it will prompt for the password. No, I think some naming convention wrong. Maybe enter some wrong naming. Try again. So if you do some naming wrong, so that it won't connect. Yes, see that it will immediately prompting for your authentication. The Nagios console here, which I already have, 48.200. So this is how the Nagios core console looks like, and which is almost version -2 version, which means that latest version -2 is the this version. I hope, Sujis, I have answered your question.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So this is the Nagios console from whenever you log in from here. So after that, you can just go to this tactical overview. So which means that it will give you an entire picture of your Nagios, what it is doing currently. So you can see that what is your host health status, combination of all the host and combination of all the services, how much percentage you are having. So this is matters whenever you have an SLA matrix in your organization. Example, say organizations will, some of the service based organizations will commit that I have SLA call 99.99 percentage. So what does mean SLA 98.99%? So always your host would be up and running and your services will be up and running. So if you have any downtime in between, or your host is down or your service is down, which means that your host health and your service health will go down, which means that your SLA will be going to miss. So service level agreement is going to miss. So in this case, what are the exemption you will have in terms of SLA? Example, some of the downtime, scheduled downtime. So you have some scheduled downtime. So which means I need to perform some maintenance. Example, I wanted to increase my RAM capacity, which is a scheduled downtime for the host. So which means that if you schedule your downtime on the Nagios, example, we have some of the services here. Example, if you go to the summary, say here, Linux services, here you can schedule a downtime on this maintenance. You can see that. So schedule maintenance for this service group, and it will ask you for the date and time, and the what is the subject line here, and how many hours and minutes you are going to take the downtime. So if you fix this downtime, so from that SLA the downtime window would be excluded, so that your SLA will be more. Otherwise, if you do not schedule for a downtime in Nagios, your SLA report will show wrong, because it is a scheduled downtime and you did not do any downtime schedule on the Nagios. So that is one important point you have to make in terms of this. So that will I will show you how to do that scheduled maintenance whenever you are having any scheduled maintenance on the servers or services. So I will just show you that what is the precautions you have to take before you do that. So this is the tactical overview: how many hosts are down, how many services are unreachable or up and running, and how many hosts are pending. So whenever you are adding any host and services, which will take 5 to 6 minutes for the interval to add your servers to come up, or your services to come up on the Nagios console. So that time you will see some pending services on this. Okay, and how many services are in critical, how many services are in warning, how many services are unknown. Example, if you have the plugin is not properly configured. Example, you have a Windows server and you do not have any S drive in the server, but you have configured a S drive to monitor. So that time it will show as a unknown, something like that as a example. So how many are status okay? So you can click on this, you can see that 15 services are in okay status, like that. So how many pending? So here you can see that all of the, so here you can see flapping detection. Flapping detection in the sense like Nagios Core does not need any license, it's entirely free. So you just need to configure by your own, but Nagios XI need license. Okay, so flap detection, which means that your services or host is going up and down, up and down, up and down, which is called as a flapping. Like your service or host is not stable, like if it is not up for 5 minutes or it is not down for 5 minutes, it is continuously going up and going down, which is called as a flapping. So flap detection, if you have any, so it should immediately disable the alerting on the server. So that is the one advantage in the Nagios, is that if any service is detected as a flapping, which means that the service is going up, down, up, down, up, down, which means that the Nagios will automatically put the service notifications off. So that is the flap detection. And the notifications, so how many notifications you have enabled or how many notifications you have disabled, so it will show the details here. So event handler, so the Nagios will use an event handler to check your Nagios events, which means that all the services and host checks are scheduled, which means that 1 2 3 4 5, the numbering system, it will schedule in the events. So events are processing, so the services are keep on verified by the Nagios. So that is called as an event handler service. So don't worry about it, I will tell you how to verify this. And active checks and passive checks. So what does mean by this active checks and passive checks here? So active checks is something like you have a Nagios agent and you say actively checking. So actively checking means that Nagios client will check its configured services at configured interval. Example, say I configured for every 5 minutes, which means that the Nagios client will check for every 5 minutes. Example, about memory, about CPU, about C drive, and about some of the services, for example MS SQL service. So it will collect the data, status data at every 5 minutes on the Nagios client, and it will send the data to the Nagios server for the processing. So the Nagios server will receive the data and it will put the data into the appropriate format then it will show the graphs and it will show the performance data, all of this stuff, which is called as an active checks. So but we called one thing as passive checks. So what is that passive checks? Which means that the Nagios server itself go and capture the data of Nagios client at every particular configured level. When which means that we have configured for every 5 minutes. So it goes, the Nagios server will go every 5 minutes to the clients and execute this data details and collect the data and come back. So that is called as a passive. So whenever you configure the passive checks, so the Nagios will have more load, which means that you have to increase the capacity. Okay, but if you have active checks, which means that your Nagios may not have more load. So that is the difference between the active checks and the passive checks. Otherwise, you got this answer, or you have any questions? Okay, so active checks means the Nagios client. Example, say that I have one Windows server. This Windows server, I would like to monitor the Windows server services from the Nagios. Example, which is called memory, CPU, C drive, and maybe some other services. I call it as MS SQL service. So active checks in the sense I will install maybe a SNMP or maybe a agent on that server. So the server will do, means the agent or Nagios agent will execute at configured intervals. So interval means I configured every 5 minutes to execute. So what are the plugins are there on the client? It will execute at every 5 minutes and send the data to the Nagios server. So it is called as an active check. Passive check means, so the checks will happen, but every time the Nagios server will go and poke this Nagios client and to get the data and execute the plugins and get the data. So that is called as a passive checks. Sai Kumar, you understand, or you have any question?
Clear, clear.
Okay, active checks in the sense the client itself send the data to the Nagios server, and passive checks in the sense the server will go and collect the data. So that is the major difference in between. So that is active checks and passive checks. So this is the one tactical view console, and if you can go to the maps, so these maps you can also configure based on your network diagram. So what is the host, and it has any dependencies to the other host, or where it is connected to the network device, and which device is connected to where, something like this. You can define the map based on your configuration files. So I will just give you some example where you can configure this configuration. So that is something advanced, but I'll just give you an idea on that. So you can just click on the host and you can see all of the host details here, whether it is up and running. So here you can get the summarized details, how many hosts are up and how many services are currently monitored. And if you go to the services, and you can see all of this data in detail, how many services are you have and what they are doing. So when was the last check, how much duration, whether the server is configured and running in. So this is attempts, you can see that, right? I have said in the example in the first place. So how many times it should verify? Every five. So it will verify every 5 times and say that whether the service is not reachable, then it's marked this as a down. So which also have some terminology which is called soft checks and hard checks. So I will let you know what are that soft checks and hard checks, how it works in when coming to the configurations, sorry, coming to this verification. Okay, you can see that summary details, and host group summary details and host group grid like details. Service groups, you can just click on. I do not have any service group configured here, but that's why. So you can see that what are the problems in a single screen if you have any, and what are the host in single screen, and if you have any network outages, which will show you. So there, if you configure the outage, which means the scheduled outage, so that will be shown over here, so with the details and notes. So here some of the reports, the reports will show you that availability. That's what I say, that some on the host and select here and create report. You can see that this is something like SLA report. So what it will show from the last 7 days. So what is the host detail, whether the service is up or down, what is the threshold is meeting over here. So you can see that how much time it is up, how much time it is down, how much time it is unreachable. So which will be calculated in a SLA report. So something like if your uptime is more like 99.99%, which means that you are meeting your SLA, but your downtime is more, then you are not meeting your SLA. So this is something like a little bit details, or this is based on some of the parameters, like maybe sometimes network issues or sometimes scheduled downtimes, so that you have to put in a place so that you will get some appropriate data to verify it. So if you want to see some trending data over here, so this is something like graph data. I will show you here. Maybe I can go to localhost and see what is today's data looks like. So when it was up and when it was down. So this host was down from the last 24 hours, so I did not get any data over here. But if you have, so it will get some data when it's up, when it's down, all of the details. You can see that 21 hours 48 minutes was up, which means 100%. So and alerts, so when the alerts would be sent, all the details will be appears here, so which will provide you like when the host was added, when the service check was completed, all the details. You can see into the summary as well, and historical diagrams as well. Example like this, which will summarize in a minimum and maximum summarize details. So based on this, you can verify that the data using that the host is up or down. Have you shown how to install Nagios and configure? No, not yet. Not yet. So this is another Nagios server. I'm just showing you before installing this. I did not show you how to install the Nagios server yet. So I will show you. So notifications and event logs. So this is the event logs where it will show all of the details. So how many services are getting checked at every minute, and how many are failed, how many are paused, if you have any plugin related errors, or if you have any database related errors, all of the events will be shown here. So here some of the comments, this is comments will be coming from your scheduled downtime or scheduled service downtimes. If you put any comments or if you put any servers in a disabled mode, so that with the acknowledgement notifications, so that comments will come appear here. So you can clear the comments based on your whenever your downtime is completed, before the downtime window, or if you have some long time services to be acknowledged, so that you can show up here. So don't worry about it, I will show you. So if you have any scheduled downtime, that will also appear here. And so what is the Nagios related performance data, so that will be appear here. So what is this version, and whether your notifications are enabled and service checks is running, passage checks are, all of this related to the Nagios server. And scheduled queue, so this is what I'm talking about. So when the service was scheduled to execute, it check, which means that this service is scheduled for this time, So it's going to run this plugin, so which means that this current load plugin and get the data from the client side. So this is what, and enable all these active checks and configuration. Maybe you can just verify it. So what is the configuration here? You can see some detailed information about it. So that's about the overview of the Nagios core server. So I think so we have server is ready. So then we will see the Nagios core installation.